This section is on the midpoint formula. In this section, you will learn how to find the midpoint when given two endpoints. You will also learn how to find an endpoint when you are given the midpoint and another endpoint. What is a midpoint? Given the line segment AB, the endpoints are at A and B, the midpoint is at C. The midpoint divides the line segment into two equal segments. Because C is a midpoint, AC will equal CB. The midpoint formula is as follows. The x-coordinate of the midpoint is given by the formula x sub m equals x sub 1 plus x sub 2 over 2, where x sub 1 and x sub 2 are the x-coordinates of the endpoints. The y-coordinate of the midpoint is y sub m equals y sub 1 plus y sub 2 over 2, where y sub 1 and y sub 2 are the y-coordinates of the two endpoints. In example 1, you are asked to find the coordinates of a midpoint. Note from the drawing that the endpoint at A has coordinates 3, 2, and the endpoint at B has coordinates of -1, -1. We calculate the x and y coordinates separately. X sub m, which is the x-coordinate of the midpoint, equals x sub 1 plus x sub 2 over 2. Substituting gives 3 plus -1 over 2 equals 2 over 2, which equals 1. Y sub m equals y sub 1 plus y sub 2 over 2, which is 2 plus -1 over 2 equals 1/2. We join those two answers together into a single ordered pair of 1, 1/2. In this problem, we are given one endpoint and a midpoint, and we're asked to find the other endpoint. We're told that the midpoint has the coordinates 3, 4, and the endpoint that we know has the coordinates 1, -1. We find the other endpoint. First, find the x-coordinate of the midpoint. Substitute into x sub m equals x sub 1 plus x sub 2 over 2. The x-coordinate of the midpoint is 3, therefore we replace x sub m with 3. The x-coordinate of one endpoint is 1, we replace x sub 1 with 1. We don't know the other endpoint yet, therefore x sub 2 remains x sub 2. We have the expression 3 equals 1 plus x sub 2 over 2. Multiply both sides by 2. When we do that, on the left we have 3 times 2. On the right, the 2's cancel. This gives us 6 equals 1 plus x sub 2. Subtract 1 from both sides. This gives us 5 equals x sub 2. On the right, we have y sub m equals y sub 1 plus y sub 2 over 2. The y-coordinate of the midpoint is 4, therefore we replace y sub m with 4. We replace y sub 1 with -1. We don't know what y sub 2 is. Our expression so far is 4 equals -1 plus y sub 2 over 2. Multiplying both sides by 2 gives us 4 times 2 or 8 on the left. On the right, the 2's cancel, and we have -1 plus y sub 2. We add 1 to both sides. That gives us 9 equals y sub 2. Therefore, our endpoint is the point 5, 9. Now we're working with variables instead of numbers. Given the endpoints of a segment are at A, B, and C, D, find the midpoint. All we're doing is substituting into the midpoint formula. We're letting x sub 1 equal A and x sub 2 equal C. This gives us A plus C over 2. We're letting y sub 1 equal B and y sub 2 equal D. This gives us B plus D over 2. The midpoint, therefore, is A plus C over 2, B plus D over 2. Here are some practice problems for you to try. Pause the DVD after each problem. After you have finished, come back for the answer. Practice problem 1. Given the endpoints -2, 2, and 5, -5, find the midpoint. We substitute into the midpoint formula. Let's work with the x-coordinate of the midpoint first. We have x sub m equals x sub 1 plus x sub 2 over 2. This gives us negative 2 plus 5 over 2 equals 3 over 2. Y sub m equals y sub 1 plus y sub 2 over 2. Substituting gives us 2 plus negative 5 over 2 equals negative 3 over 2. Therefore, our midpoint is 3 over 2, negative 3 over 2. Practice problem 2. Given the midpoint 0, 1 and the endpoint with coordinates of 2, 5, find the other endpoint. The answer to problem 2 is negative 2, negative 3. We substitute into x sub m equals x sub 1 plus x sub 2 over 2. Recall that the x-coordinate of the midpoint is 0, therefore we replace x sub m with 0. The x-coordinate of the endpoint we know is 2. Let's replace x sub 1 with 2. We now have the expression 0 equals 2 plus x sub 2 over 2. Multiplying by both sides will clear the 2's on the right. On the left, 0 times 2 is 0. We have 0 equals 2 plus x sub 2. Subtract 2 from both sides, and this will give negative 2 equals x sub 2. Let's find the y-coordinate of the other endpoint. We substitute. The y-coordinate of the midpoint is 1, therefore we replace y sub m with 1, and we replace y sub 1 with 5, which is the y-coordinate of the endpoint that's given to us. We now have the expression 1 equals 5 plus y sub 2 over 2. Multiply both sides by 2 to clear the fraction. On the left, we have 1 times 2, which is 2. On the right, the 2's cancel, and we have 5 plus y2. Subtracting 5 from both sides gives us negative 3 equals y sub 2. Practice problem 3. Given the midpoint negative 3, negative 7, and the endpoint 2, 8, find the other endpoint. The answer to practice problem 3 is negative 8, negative 22. Recall that we were given the midpoint of negative 3, negative 7, and the endpoint of 2, 8. To find the x-coordinate of the endpoint, we substitute into the midpoint formula. X sub m equals x sub 1 plus x sub 2 over 2. Since the x-coordinate of the midpoint is negative 3, we replace x sub m with negative 3, and we replace x sub 1 with 2. We leave x sub 2 as x sub 2. This gives us the expression negative 3 equals 2 plus x sub 2 over 2. We multiply both sides by 2. On the left, this gives us negative 6. On the right, the 2 in the denominator and the 2 that we multiply cancel, and we're left with 2 plus x sub 2. Subtracting 2 from both sides gives us negative 8 equals x sub 2. To find the y-coordinate of the midpoint, we substitute. Y sub m equals y sub 1 plus y sub 2 over 2. We replace y sub m with the y-coordinate of the midpoint, which is negative 7. We replace y sub 1 with the y-coordinate of the endpoint we're given. That value is 8. We have the expression negative 7 equals 8 plus y2 over 2. Multiplying both sides by 2 gives, on the left, negative 7 times 2, or negative 14. On the right, the 2's cancel, and we're left with 8 plus y sub 2. Subtract 8 from both sides. On the left, we have negative 22. On the right, we're left simply with y sub 2. Thus, the y-coordinate of the other endpoint is negative 22. Practice problem 4. Given the endpoints x, y, and t, v, find the midpoint. This is just practice working with variables. Answer to practice problem 4 is x plus t over 2, y plus v over 2. The answer to practice problem 4 is x plus t over 2, y plus v over 2. We are simply substituting into the midpoint formula. We replace x sub 1 with x and x sub 2 with t. This gives us x plus t over 2. To find the y-coordinate of the midpoint, we replace y sub 1 with y and y sub 2 with v. This gives y plus v over 2. In practice problem 5, find the midpoint. What we're being asked to do there is to read a graph. When we do that, we find that the endpoints are at 3, 2, and -4, -1. Now we substitute. X coordinate of the midpoint is x sub 1 plus x sub 2 over 2. That equals 3 plus -4 over 2, which is -1/2. The y-coordinate of the midpoint is y sub 1 plus y sub 2 over 2, which is 2 plus -1 over 2, which is 1/2. The midpoint, therefore, is -1/2, 1/2. Practice problem 6. Given the endpoint -4, -1, and the midpoint -6, -3, find the other endpoint. We substitute into the formula, and the answer is -8, -5. First, we find the x-coordinate of the other endpoint. Substituting gives us -6 equals -4 plus x2 over 2. We multiply both sides by 2. This gives us -12 equals -4 plus x squared. Add 4 to both sides. This gives us -8 equals x sub 2. The answer to practice problem 6 is -8, -5. To find the x-coordinate, substitute the values we know into the formula. This gives us -6 equals -4 plus x sub 2 over 2. Multiply both sides by 2. This gives us -12 equals -4 plus x sub 2. Add 4 to both sides, and we get -8 equals x sub 2. Do the same thing to find the y-coordinate. We have -3 equals -1 plus y sub 2 over 2. We multiply both sides by 2. We have -2 equals -1 plus y sub 2. Adding 1 to both sides gives the result -5 equals y sub 2. Practice problem 7. Given the two endpoints 2, 4 and -2, 6, find the midpoint. The answer is 0, 5. Substituting into the formula gives us 2 plus -2 over 2 equals 0 over 2, which is 0. Substituting the y values gives us 4 plus 6 over 2 equals 10 over 2, which equals 5. Practice problem 8. Given the endpoints 1/3, 4/5, and -3/2, 1/4, find the midpoint. The answer to problem 8 is -7/12, 21/40. The x-coordinate of the midpoint is 1/3 plus -3/2 over 2. We find a common denominator, which is 6. 2 6 is equivalent to 1/3, and -3/2 is equivalent to -9/6. We add those values, and we get -7/6 over 2 over 1. Remember, when we're dividing with fractions, we can invert and multiply. And we have -7/6 times 1/2 equals -7/12. Now let's find the y-coordinate of the midpoint. 4/5 plus 1/4 over 2. If we look at the numerator, we have denominators of 4 and 5. The least common denominator is 20. Equivalent fractions are 16 over 20 plus 5 over 20, all divided by 2. Adding gives 21 over 20 divided by 2 over 1. To divide, we multiply by the reciprocal of the bottom fraction. This gives us 21 over 20 times 1/2 is 21 over 40. Therefore, the midpoint is -7/2, 21 over 40. Practice problem 9. Given the endpoint 1/2, -1/2, and the midpoint 2/3, find the other endpoint. The answer to practice problem 9 is 7/2, 13/2. We substitute into the formula for the x-coordinate of the midpoint to find the missing x-coordinate of the other endpoint. When we do that, we have 2 equals 1/2 plus x sub 2 over 2. When we multiply both sides by 2, we get 4 on the left equals on the right 1/2 plus x sub 2. We subtract 1/2 from both sides. This gives us 3 1/2 equals x sub 2. Written as an improper fraction, which it usually will be on the SATs, gives us 7/2 equals x sub 2. To find the y-coordinate, we substitute. We have 3 equals negative 1/2 plus y sub 2 over 2. Multiply both sides by 2 to clear the fraction. We're left with 6 equals negative 1/2 plus y sub 2. We add 1/2 to both sides, and we have 6 1/2 equals y sub 2. Writing 6 1/2 as an improper fraction gives us 13 over 2 equals y sub 2.